Hello everyone. I thought I would do a follow-up video to my last one about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. There were so many commercials and trailers and TV spots coming out. I was pretty convinced we saw almost the whole entire movie. So I had put everything together in what I thought was chronological order to see what we got, see if we could figure out the movie and all the scenes and where they go. There's a lot of stuff from the trailers, dialogue, scenes, and everything that were not in the film. Every step of the way, I'm like, I know something should be here, and it isn't. I can't understand it. Like, I can't understand why those things would be cut out. I don't want to make it seem like I'm really picking and I didn't like it. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It did have a real Ghostbusters feel, but as I was watching it, I could just tell it was trimmed down or something. I don't think it was the director's fault. I think maybe they made him trim it down by probably 15 minutes. That's what I really feel like. Maybe the company, Sony, wanted a shorter movie. I don't know. I really would like there to be a director's cut, but I did enjoy it. I do want to see it again. It did go very quick. People theorized that it was going to just be one thing after another, one scene after another, and it really was. It was very, very, very quick. So I would have liked maybe a little bit more time. I would have liked a little bit more slow time, a little more character development, because it was so fast. You didn't quite get that, and if you were a new person coming into this movie, you could be confused. So I know you can't appease everybody, and I know you can't make sequel movies that are going to keep everyone up to speed. You just can't do that. But I think there could have just been a little bit better, some of the little intros of the characters, even though we know who they are, just, you know, a scene, an establishing scene or something like that, rather than into dialogue, into a cut, into a dialogue, like kind of thing. It just went very, very quick. Let's start. I've got all my notes. I was working on them last night, and then I had to kind of think about it this morning. I couldn't get to bed last night. I had reflux. I don't know what's going on. I feel like everybody in my age group all of a sudden has reflux. I don't know what is happening, what this epidemic of reflux is with people my age. So shout out if you suffer the flux, because I understand what it's like. So I went to bed, and I'm like, I'll figure it out in the morning. And I was trying to like just put it all together. I didn't see anybody have a shot by shot list of everything that happened. So, of course, as you can imagine, there are going to be spoilers in this. I'm going to go over shot by shot. I've got my questions, I've got my concerns, and I've got a list of the deleted scenes that were not in the movie but were in the trailers. The whole movie opens with a poem about fire and ice by Robert Frost, and it's kind of something that Ray talks about at some point in the film. So I thought that was very interesting, and that was very different. Now, when I was making my original prediction of how things were going to open, I realized I forgot tradition. I forgot that there's usually that opening scene, much like the library scene, and then Ghostbusters 2, it was Dana and Oscar, and then even Ghostbusters 2016, it was the museum, and then in Afterlife, it was Egon and the Sentinel terror dog. So I forgot that there should be like an open, not a stinger, I don't know what to call it, but you know, that opening tradition scene that we get from Ghostbusters. So what it was was actually the Firehouse from 1904. So we get an establishing shot. They've like aged it, you know, backwards to make it look like it was way back in time. That was done very, very well. I was really impressed to see that. We do see the firemen going to a building, and they approach the doors. That is in the trailer. And we see that sort of mist coming out. And there's actually an alternate angle of that wasn't in. That was the first thing I noticed, because there's a close-up in one of the trailers where you see the mist sort of coming out really close up. Though they didn't have that shot in there. Small thing, it really doesn't matter, but there's a lot of that. There's a lot of alternate angles, a lot of alternate scenes. There's just quite a bit I noticed. One of the firemen puts his hand on the door. It freezes to the door, but they're able to free him. They open the door, and inside they see all the people in there frozen. And there's some kind of mysterious record playing, some kind of sound. It sounds like a chant going on. So while there's firemen checking out the people who are frozen, there's somebody in the corner in this, like, I thought it was gold, but it's brass. It's a brass suit of armor, and they're holding an orb. So someone approaches, and the person who seems frozen, their eyes open, and their fingers move a little bit, and that orb there's the little hieroglyphics that are on it. They move, and it looks like it appears that it's sealed. All of the other people that are frozen just start breaking. They just start crumbling. They shatter into pieces. That's the weird opening that, you know, we would get from Ghostbusters. Didn't expect it to be that scene, and that kind of sets the stage. So I thought that was a really good scene. I enjoyed it. I loved the scene that go back in time, way back in 1904. Just seeing what it was like, seeing just a glimpse. It was just, you know, a shot of the Ghostbusters Firehouse as it looked in 1904. No city buildings around it, right? It was like almost its own building. There was just like nothing there. It looked really, really cool. In my last video, I had a shot of Trevor driving the car. I thought that was going to be the starting off point, and somehow they were going to switch and not let Trevor drive. That shot of Trevor driving is literally the last scene. It's the very, very ending scene that you see of the main characters, is Trevor getting to drive the car because he's an adult now. So I was completely wrong about that. The sewer dragon scene, I think we all kind of knew. I mean, I put that where I thought it was going to be, and I was right on that. And we did see, I would say, pretty much that whole scene. They played that entire scene for us. I mean, they should have just given us the first, 5 minutes, maybe minus the flashback scene. But they pretty much gave us that whole thing, that they're chasing the sewer dragon through New York. Now, I have to say, here's where our first deleted scene appears to be. I can't believe they cut it, but it's Janine answering the phone saying, "Ghostbusters, what do you want?" That whole thing. That probably should have been the first thing we saw when we get to the Firehouse, when it's modern day, after, some of the opening music plays. But it's cut out. It's not there. You saw them just driving. They were just already driving through the city, chasing after this sewer dragon ghost. I thought the sewer dragon ghost was cool. Didn't see it too much, but, saw it enough. And it leaves its blue slime everywhere. I wish we'd kind of seen a little more of the blue slime. We saw this a couple of different colors, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it did leave blue slime on Ecto-1, and it through the sewer. It was like coming out. We actually cut to like a little, I guess, newsreel documentary about the Ghostbusters. And this was really good. I really loved this, and I was not expecting this, where they were talking about the Ghostbusters. So it showed a clip of them from the 1984 movie, running through the streets. And they also had Ghostbusters cereal commercial. They had the commercial for the real Ghostbusters trap, the toy that you could use, and the proton packs. And they had a little clip of Ray Parker Jr. dancing in the street, for his music video. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting them to make any of that like canon, I guess you could say. But the thing, and I know everybody was waiting for this, and huge spoiler, of course, this whole thing is going to be spoiler, that they had a clip of the Statue of Liberty walking through New York. So Ghostbusters 2 is officially canon. It's in there. There's nothing else, nothing else you can say about it. It is official. And then it kind of ended with the damage, showing the damage that they had done from the sewer dragon chase that Phoebe did, really. And then there was a bystander saying, thank God we're not hurt, basically. So then the TV shuts off, and it's Walter Peck. You see him from the back for a second, and then he turns around and berates them. Pretty much like the scene plays out in the trailer. We did see pretty much all of that scene, I would say. Again, minus a little bit of dialogue here or there. I don't remember Peck saying, "You're the descendants of Egon Spengler," because that was in the trailer, but I don't remember. I again, there were a lot of little things that I'm like, was that in there? Was that not in there? I went with a friend, and I was asking. There were a lot of things that he saw in trailers that were not in it too. So I know a lot of things were cut, but I don't remember if that line of dialogue was cut. And there is a reason I feel like it was cut, and we'll get into that later. Phoebe is really the main issue because she's not old enough, so she has to be off the team. So they're in big trouble, and she really cannot be a Ghostbuster as it stands because she's too young. Trevor's now 18, and he can't be. So she's essentially kicked off the team by her family. So the next scene I was wrong about as well. It's establishing the Firehouse and the laundry scene, I guess basically you could say. So there's an establishing shot. It shows the outside of the Firehouse, and there's someone riding a bike, through. Gary and Callie had just come back from all that. in their uniforms and everything after Peck's office, and they are going to put the ghost in the containment unit in the Firehouse. And so they're talking back and forth with Phoebe. She's angry because she wants to be a Ghostbuster, and they're saying, well, you can't. I don't know, like, I was asking my friend this. It's like, are Callie and Gary together? Like, are they an item? Are they not? Like, they joked about being possessed, but like that was it. They don't seem like they were in a relationship. There was nothing, not a tender moment between them, not a heart to heart. Really, there was a little tiny bit, but it was kind of jokey. But there was just no feeling of like they were in a relationship to me. It just didn't feel that way. So I was confused. And he was saying he was trying to be like a dad or a friend or something, because he didn't even know what he was. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you are either. So let's figure that all out together. Phoebe and Callie get into an argument, and there's some like cutaway joke that they do again later where she says, I don't know, Phoebe says, oh, I've got some words for you or something. And something like Callie says, well, you can either tell me those words or you can go to your room or something like that. And then it cuts, and then it's Callie and Gary walking down the stairs to the basement, and Gary's like, wow, I can't believe she said those actual words to you, or something like that. It was just a gag. I mean, it just wasn't anything in there. It would have been nice if we heard something. So when Gary is putting the sewer dragon trap into the containment unit, he can't get it to work. It's not working. He can't get the lever to go down. Callie helps him, and they have to both like do it, and it's really, really difficult. And then when they get it in, it's like it shakes, like something's wrong, and they don't know what's wrong, but it's something's wrong with the containment unit, and so we know that at this point. So I think it's here that we go to Ray's Occult, and there was that shot, and again, it went so quick I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure there's this shot in the trailer of a woman walking in, and she's got the doll over the back of her shoulder. We see her from the back, and I don't think that was in there. And it was just, because I noticed, I'm like, where's the shot of walking through and going into Ray's? All the people lined up, that was in there, and Ray is doing a podcast, and podcast is there, and podcast is trying to like tell him, maybe say subscribe, that kind of thing. That was funny. And there was this whole scene where the woman, she thought a watch that was her late husband's was haunted, and he used a PKE meter. It wasn't. And then for some reason, like podcast smashes it with a hammer, like a big mallet or something, because it gets views or whatever, which was a weird thing. So Phoebe ends up going to Ray's, and she brings that pink mood slime, so from Ghostbusters 2. And then she goes to see podcast. He's in like the basement or lower level of Ray's Occult. His parents think that he is at space camp, and they call him, and he's got to play music that sounds like a countdown and everything. And again, he was funny. I mean, him and Ray, I would say, were the best, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But all of a sudden, there are the mini puffs. There they are. There's no explanation why they're alive or living or animated or what happened. If there was, then I really missed it. But there's no explanation. The orb hasn't gotten there yet. Like, we don't know why they're alive, basically. I think at this point we go back, if I remember, we go back to the Firehouse, and Janine is there, and she's taking pictures with her cell phone, which is just such a weird, I mean, clearly you would do that, but it was just a weird thing for me to think about. But her and Gary talk about the containment unit, and she just talks about how there's like 40 years worth of ghosts in there, and they've never done anything about it, and he asks why that is, and she says something like, well, what could we do, flush them, or something like, we can't flush them down the toilet, or something like, it was something like that. It wasn't quite that, but there was just nothing else to do with them. So they've just been collecting in there for all these years, and something's got to be wrong now. But she says she's going to call Winston and the lab and have his guys come check it out. Janine's hair is now back to the color that it was in the original. I don't know why they made that change. I don't know if they just wanted to connect, but they didn't do that with Afterlife, which I was kind of surprised, because they did it in the commercial. There was some commercial that they did, and her hair was the color. What she still looked like she did in the movie. Everybody recognized her, but it was gray in Afterlife. So now in this one, it's not. It's back to that, Auburny brown color. But I mean, it looked good. She looked great. I mean, I was really, really happy to see her. But without that scene, that first Ghostbusters, what do you want? Like, that's what I mean. Like, it was just, it went right into dialogue. Like, you just, there's a character and they're talking. You know, there's no, like, I don't know what's called, like, an establishing shot or something where you can take a breath and go, oh, there's that character. And you know, it's something that familiarizes maybe an audience who's new, or that, you know, it's like something like a little intro, like just briefly. We can't reintroduce every single character, every single movie. I get that. We can't possibly do that. But sometimes you have to like take a beat and just see the character for a minute and just see what they're doing. What are they doing in that moment? And it just gives you the idea of who they are, rather than, here's Janine, she's taking pictures, and we have no idea why she's there. But if you had seen that scene earlier of her answering the phone, you would get it. Oh, she's there, and she works at the Firehouse. She, you know, so that it was kind of, and they did that with Winston too, which we'll get into later. Just kind of really cut into their introductions, like too fast and too awkward. So the Nadeem character comes in to Ray's with the orb. He explains he's going through his grandmother's junk and is trying to sell stuff. And the mini puffs react, even though they're downstairs, they react and they go run and hide. Ray uses the PKE meter on the orb, and it just goes crazy. And the orb literally starts freezing over on the table. It causes a little earthquake, or the building shakes and things are falling. And we do see ice start traveling down the street to the Firehouse, just like on the ground, like just like little speckles of it. And then we see the containment unit, the walls. That's when we see the walls start cracking around the containment unit. They get a call to go out. They're back at the Firehouse, and it's just Callie and Trevor and Gary. And of course, Phoebe's trying to go, and they tell her, no, you can't go. We already went through this. So she's very upset. And I could swear in the trailer there was a long shot. You see Phoebe's back, and you see the Ecto-1 leaving. And there might have been an alternate angle of it, but I don't remember if that exact shot was in it. I don't think it was. It was a good shot, and if it was either too quick, or they just used a different angle. But I don't remember. Again, it happened all so quick. So with Phoebe having nothing to do, she goes out alone in the city, which, I mean, she should not be doing, and just goes to play chess by herself. When the chess pieces start moving, we've seen that. We kind of knew it wasn't Egon, and it wasn't. So this is a whole part of the plot that was kept secret, and there is a ghost girl named Melody, and she looks kind of like how Egon did. He was, you know, human and blue and sort of glowing a little bit, and she has kind of like a little bit of flames to her, but she can actually speak, and she starts speaking to Phoebe, and Phoebe just seems completely unfazed. Like, she already saw the spirit of her grandfather. She's already chasing all these ghosts around. I understand she might be used to it, but I don't know that she's ever communicated with a ghost like this speaking, and it doesn't seem so. So you'd think there'd be a little bit of surprise in her, like, oh, this is something different, and I'm communicating with a ghost, and you look like a girl, like I do, like you look like me, like, you know, that kind of thing. And it was kind of glossed over, like, yeah, you're a ghost, yeah, well, like, no big deal, kind of thing. And so much so that the ghost was surprised. The ghost was like, wow, you're still here and you haven't ran out. So that was, I mean, I feel like that could have been a little bit, you know, a little bit more dialogue there between them. Melody, we see, can hold matches, which Phoebe does ask about how she's able to hold things, and it's explained a little bit, but it's revealed that she passed in a fire along with her family, and I don't know if it was her or if they said it, but it seemed to me to be implied she started the fire, and that was why everybody passed, and they have crossed over and she hasn't, because of maybe this reason, and has to redeem herself in some way in order to cross over. So she uses the match, and that might be why she's got more flames sort of around her that look, you know, like little blue flames, because of that's how she had passed. So I believe we go to the next day. Trevor is seeing slime or something on the ceiling in his bedroom. Pinfield, he's that scientist, the blonde scientist who we see works at the lab. He comes and he's inspecting the containment unit, and that's when Winston is there. And again, we just cut into the next scene, and Winston's talking, and we don't even see him yet. Like, we just hear his voice, and it's, I think is what it was. Like, not like it was on him, and we get to see Winston or something. Like, it's just like he's just talking, and he's talking about the containment unit, how Egon built it. He actually had the schematics for it, the blueprint for it, which was interesting. And it was cool to hear him talk about Egon and why he built it, how he built it, all that kind of thing. And Janine kind of explains it was the 80s. They weren't necessarily thinking about the future, so they didn't really think ahead on this containment unit, how many ghosts that they could put in there. I can't remember who it is. It's either Gary or Trevor. I don't remember. But somebody asks, what do they do? Or, they say, well, now what do we do with these units full? And Winston says to Pinfield, oh, you haven't told them yet. And so he brings them to the lab at that point. There were people theorizing about what the lab was beforehand, and there were people who were right. It is an abandoned aquarium, and they show it, and there's even like fish on the wall, like in the relief style, like on the wall or whatever, in this like Art Deco kind of thing. It was at this point I went to the bathroom, so I missed a little bit, but I asked my friend what happened, and I found out because there was something really big that was missing. Now, Ray and Podcast bring the orb there to the lab, and Ray also brings other haunted items. I guess that's sort of the deal. Like, Ray is bringing anything he finds that may actually be haunted for Winston to have. There is a haunted doll, apparently. I don't know if it was the doll from the cutscene or anything, because I didn't see it, but there's a doll that they have this sort of extraction chamber, and this chamber can pull the ghost out of the items. So they put it in there in this chamber, and it sucks it out. There was like a haunted CD player that just kept like opening and closing, and I did see that. I came back in time to see that, where they pulled this spirit out of this like CD player, Walkman or something like that. Now, one thing I thought that was strange, and I could have missed this when I was gone, Podcast and Ray clearly talk to Phoebe. Like, they speak to Phoebe like they had just seen Phoebe. So how did Phoebe not know about the lab? You mean to tell me Podcast never blabbed to Phoebe about, oh my god, there's a super secret lab and they're working on all this stuff? Like, I could understand Ray maybe trying to keep it secret, but Podcast isn't going to keep it secret. So I don't know if when I was gone, maybe I missed, maybe she said something like, why didn't you tell me about this? Perhaps, I would hope so. I also don't know if when they got there and Podcast and Ray were there, if there was any, like, not introduction, but again, like, do Gary and Callie and Trevor see Ray all the time? Did they say, oh my god, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I brought all this stuff. And, like, what, it's, again, like, if they saw Ray on the regular, why would Ray not have ever mentioned this secret lab to them? I mean, I guess it was really secret, but Podcast was there, so, like, how secret could it really be? So it was weird how that worked. I don't believe for a minute Podcast wouldn't have told Phoebe about this lab. I really don't. He absolutely would have. So we see Pinfield brings the trap with the ghost from the haunted CD player over to the wall of units, and that's when they're asking Winston, well, can't we just transfer all the ghosts from the Firehouse unit to here? And I think it's Lucky or somebody who says that would take years. It would take many, many years before we would be able to do all that. So, and then I forgot, because it was in here, Lucky was introduced, and Trevor, I guess, didn't know she was going to be there. He had no idea. And they're not an item. They're not like like, they didn't work on relationships very well in this. So it's like, are they anything? Are they friends? How would she not? I mean, he said something like, well, you didn't tell me you were interning here, or something like that. And so, but there's no romance. Like, there really is none of that. I mean, they really are just friends. It didn't play, but that's how Callie and Gary seemed too. Like, it just seemed like there was no spark or anything there. So, and then we do see Lucky using the compact thrower. She's in like a special, like, walled off, protective area, and she uses, the little thrower. We do get to see into these aquarium tanks with the ghosts in them. Of course, we see Pukey, And I'll just say right now, there's 2 scenes with Pukey. We've seen them all in the trailer. From what I'm understanding and reading, people were really, really excited to see Pukey, and that's it. You've seen it. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen Pukey. There's nothing else. I thought that was really, really surprising, and something was even cut, which we'll get into, later. There's a possessor ghost, and it possesses objects, and objects all fly around like crazy. And then Phoebe is looking in one of the aquariums, and there's that blue-ish sort of ghost there. Now, this ghost might be named Phosphor, but we don't see anything with this ghost. I'll get into that later. Like, we've seen both scenes with that ghost. We don't see anything else. If you've seen the trailers, you've seen all there is to offer from that ghost. I know she came with a toy, but people were calling that toy Bonesy, like maybe it had a name, and it did not look like that Phosphor ghost, if that's the name. I don't even know. I'm guessing that that's the name. I had to look it up, and it seemed like that was the name, but it didn't look like that, and that Bonesy, whatever that was not in the movie at all. Now, the other ghosts from the other toys were, but that Bonesy was not. So I don't know if that's what it was supposed to be or not. So later, Pinfield and Lucky are alone in the lab. We saw this in the trailer. The possessor ghost wants to play with Pinfield, like it tries to communicate, and like Pinfield answers it and is like, I can't play with you, we'll play later. So they use the spirit extractor on the orb that Ray and Podcast brought in, and that's when it starts going crazy, and the power fails, and all those aquariums holding the ghosts, they are protected by something that they built. I can't remember, but Winston spoke about it. It's something, they use some kind of power that is like their proton packs to keep the ghosts in there. Well, that all goes down, every one of them. And that's when we see that Phosphor ghost crawling out. We saw that in the trailer. And the power does come back on, so I mean, that's it. It goes back in, and like that's it. Nothing really happens. But the possessor ghost does manage to crack the glass on the aquarium tank. It shatters and stays there. It doesn't like come out, but power comes back on after Pinfield touches the orb. He grabs it. We saw that in the trailer. His hand freezes. So again, that's really almost how the whole entire scene plays out. We saw pretty much that whole scene there. So again, Trevor sees something coming from the ceiling. It's more green slime. He tells his mom about it, and again, his mom is just like, "Yeah, you deal with it. Like, you're 18 now, right? Go do." Like, she's just sitting there. She doesn't do anything. It's crazy. He does go into the attic. Here's where we have yet another deleted scene. In the trailer, there was a scene of Trevor holding a picture looking at Egon, his grandfather. That's not in it. That's deleted. Like, I can't believe that. It does connect it. Like, I know Afterlife really was all about him, but I think it was good to have at least a little bit. And those were the only 2 connections. There was this scene, and then Peck saying, the sentence of Egon. Now, later on, at the very end, they say, "Oh, we're Spanglers," or whatever, but they don't really reference Egon except for these 2 scenes, and then, building of the containment unit. But in terms of his family seeing him or something like that, this would have been a good scene, and they took it out. It's not in there, but it's in the trailer. There's a big pile of the wrappers. We saw that. That's in the trailer. Slimer's in there. Again, we saw that whole scene. That was pretty much how it was. He gets slimed. He spits it out. That scene played out completely how it was in the movie. Now, there is also that second scene. He does try to trap him again. I can't remember where that goes. I don't remember, but he goes back up into the attic, and he lays out the Cheetos in a line trying to get him out, and that's when that you see Slimer has the Cheeto dust on his mouth. But he, of course, doesn't do it again. So I can't remember what happens. I think I think there's like another little earthquake from the orb. Maybe it did something. I can't remember, honestly. And I think it spooks Slimer, and Slimer just leaves, if what I remember correctly. Later on in the day, I guess when the family's out on another call, Phoebe and Podcast go to a diner on a call. Now, is there another scene with Janine? Like, how did they get this call? We don't know. We're just like, it's just not explained. They're just walking through the city in uniform. Podcast doesn't have a patch, so he just wrote his name on there. And so I don't know. They're just out and about. They got this call. It happens to be a diner called Melody's Diner. I don't think it had anything to do with her. It's just, but that she's there. And the waitress was like, "Oh yeah, the ghost is right there. She's sitting right there." And so we kind of have an idea who it is. But Phoebe's in full Ghostbuster uniform. She never told Melody she was a Ghostbuster or anything like that. So Podcast is yelling at her, "Oh my God, get it! You know, use your pack. You know, like, let's trap it." And Phoebe just won't do it. And they're looking at each other and this and that. And then Melody just like flees out the window. And as she goes, Phoebe then turns on the proton pack and breaks the window or whatever like that. Of course, didn't catch her, wasn't even near close to catching her. We do see, I think it's around here, this ghost Melody walking through the streets at night. And I thought it was just, why would she walk? Why would she need to like take steps? She would just float, right? Like she could do all this stuff. Why would you have to like step, like you just float on through? Like you don't have to walk, I guess. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, right? But all of a sudden all the lights in the buildings around her start going out, and we start seeing that ice creeping up on the ground, and we can hear, I guess, what is Garraka's voice. And she starts communicating with it, and we find out that she is actually betraying or trying to betray Phoebe. There's some reason that Garraka needs Phoebe or someone, but she's actually, you know, trying to get something out of Phoebe. But she says, you know, does it have to be her? Do I have to do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then she says, okay, I just need a little more time. You know, I'll get it done. So now we're aware Melody's intentions aren't good. So Ray and Podcast are back at the lab at some point, and they're looking at the orb. There's the slime blower in the back. It's this scene, and Trevor is there, I believe. And Pinfield shows them the effects the orb has on the mini puffs, and the mini puffs are like hypnotized by it. And a Podcast is recording it. Now, while this is happening, the possessor ghost slips out one of the cracks that's in the aquarium glass and gets into Podcast's equipment, and nobody sees it. They're watching what effect the orb has on the mini puffs. Trevor asks where they found this orb, and it leads him, Pinfield, and Lucky back to Nadeem's apartment. So he answers the door. He's just says basically he's a reseller. He buys shoes. He sells those. He'll sell anything. He'll sell his grandmother's old stuff. So they want to see basically what it is. And, you know, they say you brought this orb in, and what else basically is there. So there's that secret brass room. I thought it was gold, but it's brass. And there are all these artifacts in there. There's this armor in there. And that's where the orb had been kept all these years by, he says, his grandmother. But it was 1904, and you didn't see the woman's face really, but she had to be in her 20s. Like it had to be. So if that was the case and it was 1904, that had to be his great-great-grandmother. He never refers to her as anything other than his grandmother, and that he had a relationship with her. He does say, like, she didn't like me or she liked my brother more, something like that. It was a complicated relationship. So he doesn't make reference that it's like it was passed down over and over. He just said it's my grandmother. But the person we saw originally in the flashback could not have been his grandmother. That had to have been his great-great-grandmother. So we learn that brass works to really control or imprison ghosts, and that's why they used it. And that orb is pretty much like an ancient ghost trap in a way, and that there are these people called Firemasters. I don't know if we quite learn about it yet, but there are these people who are in control of that kind of thing, that could do certain things. And I guess his grandmother or great-grandmother or his family was part of that. So Lucky uses a PKE meter on him, and it goes all the way up. It reacts, and they want to take him back to the lab. Again, I don't know if I'm completely correct, but I know these happen around here. But Phoebe is with Ray again because they don't really, I guess, have much to do. Phoebe can't do anything, and they're talking about. She asks him if he ever thought about being a ghost and what that would be like. And he says, you know, I think about it all the time. And they have this little talk. And it is, anything with Ray was really, really good. I have to say, I was really impressed with Dan Aykroyd. It really did bring something great to it. He was really, really good in this. And I could have seen more scenes with him because he was in it quite a bit, but his scenes were really good and important. And that made a big difference. So while they're talking, Podcast is watching the footage he recorded of the mini puffs, and he's hearing this sound over it, and it's the chanting. He's like, this wasn't there when we were there. Ray hears it, and he says it's this ancient language, most likely, and he doesn't quite understand it, but he knows somebody who may understand it. And then they go in the Ecto-C, it's that Ecto cycle, and they go off to the library. Back at the lab, there's actually an office for Peter Venkman, and we see the name on the door. And so it's Bill Murray, and he is with Nadeem, and Nadeem's got that colander thing, strainer thing on his head, like Rick Moranis wears in the first movie. And so Peter Venkman's asking him questions, and he's noticing as he gets him riled up and angry, there's a flame that starts like going crazy, almost kind of like how the mood slime was in a way. So he's asking him all sorts of weird, crazy questions, like, do you eat babies, and like weird stuff. Then he just like flings a pen at his face, like just, and it was funny. I will say, like, it was good to see Bill Murray was just not in the last scene, and we'll get to that again in a minute. But like, it was good to see that, you know, there was this extra bit. I wasn't expecting this bit at all, really. I did see the picture of Nadeem, you know, so that got a little spoiled for me, but I didn't know Bill Murray was going to be there in that scene with him. And so when he gets Nadeem angry, the flames start going crazy, and Lucky notices it, and Nadeem doesn't notice it. He doesn't think there's a connection or anything like that. He thinks that they're being weird. Back at the library, there's a really brief cameo. It appears that it was the guy from the first original Ghostbusters from the library who meets them there and, you know, shakes their hand and everything. He was there, like, coming out, but it was just so quick. It was just like, why was this there? It would have been good to see it, but it was just like a 1, 2, 3 thing. If you weren't paying attention, you really wouldn't have seen it. He, like, Ray shakes his hand and he goes in, like, I don't even think the guy says anything really. So it was weird that they did that. So they go find Ray's not friend, but somebody he knows. It's Dr. Hubert, and that's a Patton Oswalt character. And he's not believing them about this orb. He thinks it's a joke. Like, he doesn't want to hear it. And he's like, well, I'm going to call so-and-so about this. And then Podcast, like, hangs up the phone, and he's like, so-and-so is already dead. And Patton Oswalt, oh my God. And then Phoebe's like, he's not, no, nobody's dead. Like, it's not, like, he's not serious. And it was funny. People did laugh at that. I'll tell you, my theater was pretty dead. It was a full theater. There were really no reactions. That's the reason why I wanted to go at a prime time. There were just no reactions out of that theater. I don't know what it was. It clearly wasn't people there to see Ghostbusters, just to see the new movie. But there was like no reactions out of these people, like, whatsoever. It was a little laugh here and there. That was about it. Anyway, they show him the photo, or they show him something, and he knows that they're not joking, and so he takes them down into, like, the bowels of the library, basically, and shows them that book. We saw that in the trailer, of the cave carvings of Garraka. Now, this was weird to me, like, this little exposition of Dr. Hubert explaining Garraka. It was like the Harry Potter, the Three Brothers scene from Harry Potter, where it was like an animated thing almost. It just didn't feel right in this movie. It was so bizarre. It was just like little animated bits, you know, like of explaining this Garraka, and that he was imprisoned by some king and made to do their bidding, and then he, like, tried to kill everybody. Like, it was just a weird thing to have just included in there. At least to try to explain the backstory. I would have rather have seen, like, an actual flashback, all CG. I mean, obviously this was CG, but it just didn't fit. It was a very strange, weird thing. Then that's when Dr. Hubert explains the Firemaster, and that the Firemasters could capture these ghosts in these orbs, and there was, like, a little cave drawing of the orb. That explains like what Nadeem's role basically was, though that we don't quite know. We're, like, figuring it out. This doctor has very, very old recordings, and one of them is the chant that frees Garraka. And as that's playing, the possessor ghost that was in Podcast equipment jumps out, starts going crazy, gets into the record player, starts spinning the record, and it's like a cylindrical record. It's like a really old one. It's not like a flat thing. flies out and it goes into a trash can. So does the possessor, and the possessor possesses this trash bag and just starts like running around. So they go chasing after it because it's got the record. And as they're running out, Ray sees the library ghost, and that's it. Like, that's literally it. Again, you saw that whole scene. It really, like, it was cool. It was a fan thing, but like, I thought there would be something more significant to that, and there really wasn't. It was just there for fan service. So the trash bag is running through, running past people and everything. They're trying to capture it, and it gets outside, and they don't know where it went. And then Ray sees the recording and the trash bag up by the Fortitude lion that's standing outside. There's the two lions outside of the building, and he asks Dr. Hubert to help him up so he can get that recording. And as he's doing it, like the next scene, you just see the lion looking straight at his face, and that's when he screams, and the lion comes to life. But it's obviously the possessor ghost in there, possessing the statue. So Patton Oswalt's character just literally just goes and hides. Like, he just hides behind. There's a great big sign there, and he just hides behind it. So he's just gone. That's why when I originally had this, I thought the scenes were going to play out a little bit different, because I didn't see Patton Oswalt. He's hiding behind the sign. Like, I don't understand why. Like, it was weird. Maybe they only had him a certain amount of time, or maybe they had to reshoot that. I don't know. But the lion is going after Ray. Phoebe and Podcast are at the Ecto-C, and she's just like, press the button. There's, I got to get a pack or something, and he doesn't know what to press. They're pressing everything, but she finally gets a pack because one of the buttons work, and she ends up cutting the lion's tail off. It starts coming at her. I don't know if she can't get it to work or something, and as the lion lunges at her, she shoots it, and it just blasts into a million pieces, and it goes all over the cops who were just approaching to see what all the craziness was about, and it destroys their cars, and they go flying, and all that. It just explodes all over them. So it cuts to the next scene, and Phoebe is in a police precinct office, and Winston is just going on and on about, like, don't you know how hard it is to get kids to the library these days? Like, what, don't you know? And it was just weird. It was just, but he was there, and it was kind of funny, and he's like asking him, why were you doing this? What were you doing? She was like, oh, there was a ghost I had to do. And I think he says, you're not a Ghostbuster. You can't do this. And that's when Peck comes in, and he says that, see, I've been waiting 40 years for this. This was, so it played differently in the trailer, but this was later on when he's there. And he says, the Ghostbusters is now over. You're done. I've taken control over the Firehouse. Your proton packs have been taken out. They're going to be melted down. You've been evicted. You're done here. And Phoebe starts arguing back and forth with him, and he says something like, well, you can either keep arguing with me and be arrested, or you can just, behave. And so the very next shot is Phoebe in handcuffs. So again, we don't see what she said. We just are supposed to know that she said something really bad. And again, Callie and Gary walk in, and I can't believe she said that, like, kind of thing. Again, they're telling her she's being irresponsible and all this kind of thing. She argues with them. She said something to her mother, like, that wasn't nasty, but like she was just being mean and bratty. And Gary yells at her in a very authoritative way, and she just like leaves. Like, she doesn't say you're not my dad, but it's very much that kind of a thing. So she leaves, but Callie says that to Gary that she was happy that he stepped in and stuff like that. But he was feeling bad about it. He didn't like that he did that. Here's a scene that I thought was really, really good. And it was Ray and Winston. They're, I guess, still in the police precinct, but they're off, and it was in the trailer. But Ray and Winston arguing. And it is a bit more of an argument. And so I was right about this, that it wasn't just like a little, like, you can't do, like, there was a bit of a, like, back and forth with each other. And Winston is telling Ray he could have gotten the kids hurt. What was he doing? He needs to retire. This is their golden years or whatever. Like, they need to be, like, done. Like, they can't be doing this, and he can't be doing this. And Ray's like, I can't not do this. This is what I want to do. This is my life. I can't not do it. I saw people pointing to that scene. I was watching just a couple of other reviews and saying that was it was probably one of the better scenes, and I could have seen more of that. It was character development. It was emotion. It was some of what was missing from this, I guess. I know there's not a lot of time to put things like that in, but I think that's why this movie should have, if not was, a little bit longer. But scenes like that really stood out, and I really, really liked that scene a lot. And both of them were really good. Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd were really, really good together, and it was good to see them together, because, you know, even in the original movie they had some scenes together and scenes that were cut as well, so it was good to see them in a scene like that together. That was emotional. They get back to the firehouse. Yes, they've been kicked out. There's a lock on the door, but Phoebe picks the lock and they get in, but all their proton packs are gone. They don't have anything there, so they start packing up their clothes to leave, and Gary starts talking to Callie about they have to fight to keep this firehouse. They shouldn't leave. And that's where this whole song routine, you know, Busta Makes Me Feel Good, that he does quite a little bit of the song, not a whole lot, but like he goes, if there's something strange, you know, like, who are you gonna call, you know, he does that whole thing, and you know, is starting to, like, you know, trying to convince Callie that they need to stay. I think it's around here that that ghost Melody is looking over Phoebe from the bedroom window. So obviously she can, you know, teleport up and float and everything. And Phoebe apologizes for trying to zap her and said she missed on purpose, because she could have certainly got her if she wanted to or whatever. But she opens the window and invites her in, and there's the whole thing of Melody saying, oh, you're inviting me into a ghost extermination place, and she's in there, and they're talking. And I was, you know, I kind of looked over at my friend. I was just like, where is this going? Because there are people theorized that there was like a relationship of sorts between the two. Now there isn't. I'll say that. I mean, nothing materializes, no pun intended. And it could have just been much more seen as Phoebe is awkward. She doesn't have any friends. Like, nobody really talks to her other than Podcast, who doesn't seem like the best friend even. Like, that's another sort of missed opportunity. Are they best friends? Do they see each other all the time? Do they hang out? Like, what is the deal? And maybe different, that she wants to be friends with another girl. I mean, I don't know. There could have been that put in there. And right now, everybody seems like they're against her. And here's this ghost girl who did something really bad, and here she is caught. You know, so I can understand. I mean, I understand why they would be, you know, interested in each other in a friendship sort of way. But they played with it. They did play with it. I would say. You know, so much so I thought there was going to be a kiss. I did. And I only thought this was strange, not because it was the two of them, but it was because one was a ghost, and that just brings up too many questions. And somebody did mention that, like, Phoebe talking about to Ray, like, do you think about being a ghost, and this and that. It's like, did it seem like Phoebe didn't want to be alive? Like, was it to that? And so if you're going there, you're going too, like, that's going too deep. And there was comedy in it, but that's where it's like, I wasn't sure where they were going. Does Phoebe not want to exist anymore? Like, because that's a very serious thing that I don't know that you would want in a Ghostbusters movie. And even if there was an interest, it's like, well, she's interested in someone who's not alive. So how do you explain that? How do we explain other ghosts? Like, this is like, you know what I mean? It was just, it brought up too many questions, but they didn't really end up going there fully. But they talked about, or at least Phoebe talked about, how it sucked that they couldn't exist on the same plane. Like, one was a ghost, one was a human. And I think Melody said that, and Phoebe said she has an idea how to change that. And so Gary is talking to Phoebe through the door, like apologizing and stuff, and it turns out she and Melody already left. They're not there. They're gone. And they're in the lab, and, you know, we see Phoebe open the doors, and my question was, how did Phoebe get into the lab? I thought this was supposed to be the most secure place, and, like, how did Phoebe get in there? Now, we see Winston handing them something at the very beginning of the movie when they go in, so I don't know if that's like a card you get in, but if it was, they didn't use it. I didn't see it. They didn't make reference to, like, this is, you know. So I don't know how they got into the lab. So that was a big question I had. Like, how did she even get in there? Phoebe shows Melody that extraction chamber. And Phoebe says that she can get her spirit out of her body for only 2 minutes, and this way they could exist on the same plane together for a little bit. Now, this was the part that I missed from before, where when they were first in the lab, and somebody asked, my friend told me, because I was at the bathroom, but somebody asked, if you put a person in the extraction chamber, can you take, if they're possessed, can you take the spirit out of the possessed person? And they said that they were working on it. It's like possible theoretically, but they're still working on it. So that, I guess, is what gave Phoebe the idea. However, Phoebe's supposed to be like the smartest one of them all. And so she's really going to trust this machine that she doesn't really know if it's been tested to get her spirit out of her body, and she's going to be fine. Like, I found that hard to believe, like, that she would really do that. So she goes into the chamber. We did see that, and I again was wrong where that was going to be. But that's what it does. It pulls her spirit out. Again, I think just even that, I could understand if the person was possessed, but then just pulling their actual spirit out was, I don't know. I had like thoughts about that. I wasn't sure, but her spirit came out of her body, and it gets put into like a secondary chamber. And I thought these chambers were like fortified. I thought like a ghost would not be able to escape from it, but she somehow gets out. Like, she gets out of the chamber. Her spirit gets out of the chamber. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, so I was confused on that, but her spirit does come out, and she's blue, just like Melody is, and she's walking up to her, and that's where I'm like, are they going to kiss? Like, what is this? What's going on here? And that's when Melody says, oh, I'm sorry. And Phoebe's like, what? And she said, Garraka needs a human voice, and, he wanted you, or something like that. And so Garraka possesses the spirit, or controls the spirit of Phoebe, because it can communicate and possess other ghosts to do things, but it can't possess a human. So what it does is, in a convoluted kind of way, it possesses or controls Phoebe's spirit to make her human body speak the chant, because it has to be spoken by a human. Now, here's where I'm confused on that. They had the chant in the library on that record, and the possessor ghost was there. So why couldn't Garraka have just used that? They had what, now I don't know if that's humans chanting on that record. Maybe it wasn't. So they didn't really explain that, but it seemed to be the same recording that the people were using in the 1904 incident that worked, right? Or that seemed to work. I mean, maybe, didn't fully, because the whole city didn't freeze over, but the people did. So, and it seemed like the spirit, either got trapped again or whatever. I don't know. So I was confused on that. I was confused on why Garraka couldn't have just controlled the possessor ghost to take that recording and use it. So Phoebe's doing the chant, and the orb just rises up, and it just starts crumbling into pieces. All the hieroglyphs are like one individual piece. And then all of a sudden the whole room is just like covered in black smoke. We see Phoebe. We see the glowing eyes of Garraka. Melody is gone. And then Garraka reaches out. He's got like these long fingers, and he's saying stuff. I don't remember what he was saying. He's got a very growly voice, and is saying something to Phoebe. Something scary, like your bones are going to shatter, or something like that. And then Lucky comes in, and Lucky just shouts out, "Hey, asshole." And that was when I noticed she does not say, "Get away from her." And that's in the trailer. So that's another scene that was cut. And so that was cut, but she says, "Hey, asshole." She activates the proton pack, and all the beams come shooting out of the proton gun. And that's when, again, we see in the trailer, Garraka holds up his hand and freezes the blast rays, and we see the ice starting to come. Like it's not the spikes, but it's just like the ground is freezing, and we see Lucky start to freeze, but we don't see that shot of her eye freezing over, or like her face. Like, it was so brief, but we didn't get that close up of her eye freezing over. So that's yet another scene that was deleted, and I'll get into that in a minute, because I guess there's obviously a reason why that was taken out, because it's a little confusing how this frozen power kind of works. The timer runs out on Phoebe, the 2 minutes runs out on Phoebe being a spirit, and they didn't explain what would happen, but her spirit just went back into her body. Like they weren't really clear. Like, was she going to be stuck in limbo? Like, why would her spirit have gone back into her body? Like, there was no explanation of that. Wouldn't it have just stayed out and her body would have not lived anymore? Like, they didn't really get into that. I think it was at this point where it was that whole cruel summer thing, like from the trailer where everything starts freezing over on the beach. There were a lot of those scenes cut out that I didn't notice, where like it's the kids playing at the fire hydrant, the shoes hanging on the, like, everything that made it look like a real hot summer. Like, there were a lot of scenes I think that were taken out that were in the trailer, because I don't remember them, because I think we were like directly onto the beach. We saw that whole thing play out. And for some reason, I think we do see the Ecto-1 with Callie and Gary driving, and they arrive at the lab. And maybe Lucky called them. Like, I don't know. That's not explained. They just go there. And that's another thing, is that we see Phoebe and Lucky wrapped in the red jackets. But that's the thing. It's like, well, how is Lucky okay? Like, it's just, I guess, because Garraka left. But we didn't even see what made Garraka leave, essentially. I think we just saw the proton beam shatter on the floor, and that was it. We don't see anything else. So it was just weird that something was cut out of that. Like, it didn't. That's why I say things had to have been cut, and it was cut in a way that things are missing. And I'm not sure why, other than that they really just wanted to keep this short and under 2 hours. So Lucky's okay. Phoebe's not doing well, and she's wrapped up, and they drive her back in the Ecto-1, and she just basically says that she trusted someone she shouldn't have, when they ask her what was going on. Now they get back to the firehouse, and I guess Pinfield and Lucky drove in the black van, because they weren't in the Ecto-1, so but you didn't see them all going and arriving either. Like, you didn't. That's, again, like establishing shots or shots that like just should let you know who's where and what's going on. It just seems like Lucky and Pinfield are just there at the firehouse, but they weren't in the car. So it's just like, well, you just have to assume, right? Like, everything is like, well, they're just there, So Ray and Janine are also there. And Lucky and Pinfield get there, and that's when they're talking about Garraka and that he's coming and all this kind of thing. And there was a shot of Janine with Ray and Lucky. That was not in it. That was deleted. And it was around here where Lucky's trying to explain to Gary that her proton pack didn't work against Garraka, so she doesn't know what to do. And then Phoebe gets the idea of the brass, because they talk about the brass orb, and so Phoebe gets the idea of it's got to be the brass. So if she can melt down the brass, which she starts doing, to coat elements of the proton pack in it, maybe that would work. Maybe that would help control Garraka a little bit. So she's like sawing off the fire pole and just like grabbing anything that's brass, like old ornaments and things, and starts melting them down. I even asked my friend, I'm like, wouldn't that have taken a lot longer to do? Like, it seemed like it was so quick the way she did it. I'm like, it's smelting down things. Like, it would have really taken a long time to do that. I mean, I don't know about it. So but I just felt like it would have. Now, I think at this point, when Phoebe's doing that, it makes sense that here's yet another deleted scene where we saw it in trailer, where Ray is talking and explaining what's going on. And we see that they were in the kitchen there. And when they're having this conversation, we saw Trevor sitting down, and this was also cut, where Trevor says, do we have a ghost chopper? And then Janine says, no, we don't have a ghost chopper. And then Paul Rudd says, oh yeah, we really should though. That would be cool and stuff like that. So that was cut. I was so angry because it was funny. It was funny. Everyone knows about it. If you're a Ghostbuster fan, you know the whole history of that ghost chopper, and it was the toy, and people wanted to see it in the movies and everything. And they cut that out. It just wasn't in there. So every couple of scenes, I kept getting annoyed. I'm like, why would they have cut this? And it was so prominent in all these trailers. Now I don't remember if this was here. Maybe it was earlier when Winston was talking about Egon designing the containment unit. He says that Egon picked the building for a reason, because it's like a spiritual epicenter. It's very important to the spiritual world, and it sort of acts like a dam between the living and non-living world. So I don't remember where that was. That would have helped to had a lot more exposition on that. Like that was all that was said. That seems like a much more intriguing story to me than just like these elements were just like glossed over. So many of them. So I would have liked to have known more about that. So that's why everything is kind of happening at the Firehouse and why these things are happening, because it really is like this spiritual, psychokinetic epicenter or whatever they called it. Now, Garraka is out and about on the street that's now freezing. I mean, more and more of the street is freezing that we see. And there's a store called the Firemaster. And I just wasn't even thinking. I thought maybe Nadeem had a store or whatever, like he was selling things. I couldn't remember. And the Garraka asks the person whose back is turned, so he doesn't see Garraka at first, says, "Are you the Firemaster?" So, of course, harkening back to 1984, "Are you the Keymaster?" And then the guy says, "Yeah, I am," and turns around, and that's when Garraka freezes him, and he shatters. So someone does get taken out, basically. Like people were saying, we don't see a lot of people, unalived in Ghostbusters movies or anything like that. We saw Egon, of course, that they did that for that reason, but we don't really see anything happening to like innocent people, who don't have really anything to do with the story. And this guy was just, this poor innocent vape shop guy was just taken out and shattered all over the floor. I wonder when they unfroze New York what that looked like. So back at the Firehouse, Ray and Podcast are talking to Nadeem about his family, his lineage, and that he is this Firemaster, and that he should be able to control fire like his grandmother. Again, they say, grandmother. He doesn't necessarily believe it, but then he starts kind of moving his hands, and the flame is reacting to his hands, and he just like starts freaking out a little about it and tries to do it, and he's able to. There's a lighter on one side and a candle on the other, and he brings the flame over with his hands, just like by doing that, and lights the candle. So he does have like this power that he's just not aware of, and they tell him to train and to keep doing it because they need him to do this. And we see, I think, at this point, a bag on the floor. He's got the armor, that brass armor with him that was in the brass room. Now, I think it's around here where I think where Pinfield opens the van door to the black van, and there are all the packs in there because they're saying they need to get armed. Do they have anything? And I don't even know if there was a scene with Trevor saying, "Do we have any weapons?" And I don't remember if that was in there. I mean, again, it happened so quick. But they just went out into the van, and he pulled out all the packs there. And I don't even know if we saw the shot from behind. I can't remember. I think we did. But if not, like I said, there were a lot of alternate angles and stuff, like a lot of them. So anyway, they have the packs. That's good. And then we see Garraka finds Nadeem's house. The door blows open. We see all that in the trailer. We end up seeing pretty much that whole scene. And gets the horns and puts them in. Now, big question. Garraka goes into the brass room, but I thought the brass was dangerous for ghosts or these types of ghosts or entities. So first of all, how did he know where Nadeem lived? Nadeem's not even there. And secondly, would Garraka have been able to go even enter that brass room? Because the orb did not react at all when it was in Nadeem's possession, most likely because it was in the brass room and because he's a Firemaster. And of course, when he hands it over to Ray, it starts reacting. But it would make you think then, if Garraka could be in there putting on the horns, he could have gotten out at any time. He could have caused any kind of chaos at any time, or communicated with other ghosts for somebody to get him out of there. But then he's just in there. He's just in that room. Like it doesn't matter. So I just was confused. I didn't know how that brass room worked. I thought that's what it was kind of supposed to be. Now, at this point, Ray, Gary, and Janine suit up. Now, I thought they would be a little bit more into like them convincing Janine, like, we need you to do this. But there wasn't. She just, we see the scene. She puts on the glasses and she turns to the camera, and then the next shot is her, which I'm not sure where she was, but she straps, the thing on her wrist and then goes like this. We hadn't seen that scene, at least not in the trails that I had seen. That may have been in there, but we do see her put it on. And I just thought it was weird that it just happened. Like no one said anything to her. Ray was like already dressed up and all ready to go. And this is where there was yet another deleted scene where Winston is handing over the proton pack to Ray. And I'm assuming that there's an apology scene there of some sort where Winston is like, yeah, we need to do this. I'm sorry. This was happening and I didn't believe you, and hands over the proton pack. And we see it. It was in the trailer. And instead, it just cuts to Winston's just there. And is taking off his jacket and says, let's get to work. And you just see him walk off and you see him zip up. That was it. It was just like 1, 2, 3. Like, it was just quick. Way too many things definitely were cut out. But like it was just, the pacing was too much, too fast. I know people said too many characters. That could be true. But of all things, like they didn't mend that necessarily. They didn't mend that relationship. And so it's kind of sad that wasn't there. Lucky and Trevor are on the roof looking out. The clouds are pretty much gathered over. The ice is starting to gather. And we cut downstairs and there's a banging on the front door. And we see Winston, Ray, and Janine guard themselves at the door. Winston opens it and then out pops Bill Murray. And that's the whole Melons uniform thing. And somebody pointed out, and I didn't really catch it at first, but Venkman is wearing the same orange jacket that he is wearing in the original movie, or it was something. It's supposed to be like that. And even Ray is wearing the same denim jacket that he's wearing in the 1984 movie. So there's that level of detail. It wouldn't make sense that story elements don't make sense. And that's why I do think, as a quick side note, maybe the company made the director cut these things down, because I could tell someone who really liked Ghostbusters worked on this movie. And I think they made the director cut it down to under 2 hours, and that just too much was cut out, that it jumbles it a little too much. Because you're not gonna have throwbacks like that, but not have story elements. You know what I mean? There was attention to detail, attention to character and nuances and that kind of thing. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. So I just think a lot was cut out, and they made the director do it. It is really what I think. So Gary and Callie and Phoebe are around the firehouse. I can't exactly remember what they're doing. But around here is where there are 2 big deleted scenes. That iconic rooftop shot of Trevor and Phoebe, Callie, and Gary, where they're wearing the parkas, which everyone went crazy over, and Paul Rudd is that whole thing. That's not in it. I was after the movie, I was thinking back. I'm like, that shot's not in it. How could that not have been in it? It was such an important thing. And then there is a shot later, and I think it would have come around here, that Callie is busting a ghost outside of a window, and maybe she's trying to get the possessor. I don't know, but because the possessor is there, but it's not in the movie. So 2 big scenes that were taken out, but Lucky's on the rooftop and says there's a strange tricycle that's like moving on its own, and she's like, no, it's weird. It's weird. Something's wrong with it. And I think maybe it's Dan Aykroyd, Ray, who says it's the possessor. And then the possessor spirit, it sneaks in and it gets into the Ecto-1. And we saw this in that whole scene we pretty much saw, where the original 4 are behind it. The car starts up, it starts glowing red, and it starts backing up into them, and they have to take off running. And so they end up running and going behind Janine's desk, which gets smashed, and then there's files and papers going everywhere, and they're like down on the floor. After it crashes, then the possessor ghost flies away, goes upstairs. There's something I'm missing. I can't remember, but I know the possessor ghost gets into Trevor's proton pack, the wand, and it just aims directly at him, and he's stuck. He doesn't know what to do. So as it's focusing on Trevor, I could swear this is where it was, but Gary comes running down the stairs and yells Trevor. But what was interesting about the scene with Gary coming down the stairs is that shot is from the 1st floor. That's not the 2nd floor. So they used that scene in a different place, because you can clearly see it's the bricks and the green of the first floor, not the second floor. So they just put in the wrong scene, not the wrong scene, but I guess they put it in there thinking nobody would notice. But it's that scene doesn't belong there, and so of course it was moved, and whatever that scene might have been is not not fully in there. And just as it goes off, we see that the beam has bent, and it's actually Nadeem, and he's bending the proton beam. Now, I mean, does that count as fire? I don't know. I guess, yeah. I don't know. But he's able to control and bend. He's the proton master, I suppose, in that moment. And he bends it out the window. And then Podcast comes out of nowhere, and he starts smashing the proton pack with, I guess it's like the same mallet that he used for the podcast earlier. And then the possessor ghost jumps out of it and jumps into a pizza box, and there's a full pizza in there, and it jumps out and just starts like crawling away, and it goes to jump off the kitchen counter, and Slimer comes and eats it, which I don't know if that takes care of the possessor ghost. Like, I don't know why the possessor ghost would be gone now. Wouldn't it possess Slimer? Like, I don't know how that works. And then Trevor yells, "Hey, I know that guy." And it was just like, okay, I guess that works. I know that guy! And Nadeem, the Nadeem character, is looking at his hands. He's like, "Oh, I am a god, oh my," and that got kind of laugh. A lot of his stuff did get laughs. I mean, he was the comedy. He was like sort of the Rick Moranis, I would say. I was talking to my friend about it, and so he did get some genuine good jokes in there. So this whole time, the containment unit has kept shaking more and more, little by little, as it went on. Phoebe goes down, and I could swear there was a picture, and she's holding a ghost trap. And so you see that. She's walking down the stairs, and I could swear she was holding the ghost trap. And in the next scene, it cuts to her. She's just walking down the last two stairs, and she's holding the proton wand instead. So don't know if that's changed. Don't know if there's this another scene deleted, but I think that's what I saw. But anyway, she's down there as the containment unit's making noise, and Melody's there. And she's trying to convince Melody, Garaka's not going to help you. He's not going to help you cross over. You've got to stop this, and whatever. And that's when Melody says it's too late. Garaka's here. And we see him outside, and he's approaching the firehouse. Now, I can't remember now if I'm remembering the scenes right or not. Now I don't remember. But I know that there was the part... that part where the doors do fly off, and again, because I look at editing and I pay attention to editing, it was just weird the way they did it, where it was like there was the banging on the door, and we see Janine and Peter, Ray, and Winston at the door again, and there's the knocking, and you then see maybe a little of the door moving is what it was. I can't remember. And then you see Janine's reaction. All this snow is swirling around her. And then it cuts to the scene with the doors flying off. The scene of Janine reacting should have been after the doors fly off, not before it. And so I just thought that was weird. So you see Janine reacting. You see the wind rushing in the room. And then the next shot is the doors being ripped off. The reaction would have come after that. It was just weird. I'm like, that doesn't, but... Again, things were happening so quick. Maybe the doors were flying and flapping, and I don't remember. So we do see Garaka approaching the house. Now there was the scene with Pinfield. Pinfield was there, and he runs into Pukey, and Pukey's eyes are glowing that same sort of blue that Phoebe's were and stuff. So he definitely was under control of Garaka, and Pukey just pukes on Pinfield, which we saw in the trailer. But there was another scene that was deleted, which is Pinfield is on the ground, he's covered in slime, and he can't even get up. And that was cut out. And you really needed it later, because otherwise he's just missing. You see Pukey go to puke, and that's it. You don't know if he's hurt, if something worse happened, but you don't see him on the ground covered in the slime, stuck there basically. There's the whole scene with Bill Murray in the glasses. That's kind of where it happens. He does say that, tall, dark, and horny and everything, and Garaka comes in, and Phoebe's just downstairs, I guess, trying to convince Melody to help them. And I don't remember exactly how it starts, but I know Garaka's like coming in and he's saying stuff again. His voice was so low and growly. It was hard to really understand. Whole theater was shaking, and that's when they fire their all their weapons that they have. Now a little gripe. I mean, I do think they were all too close together, because they were firing like over each other's heads. It's kind of the same in the very beginning with Callie hanging out the window, and the proton beam is literally like flying right near her head. And I know people have this complaint about Ghostbusters 2016, like you can't be aiming with somebody's head literally right behind you or in front of you, like it or next to you or whatever. Like they were just too tight, too close together, I really think. Now, they do all that, and just like Lucky said, their packs don't work. Now, there was that little shot of Gary saying, damn, that was not there. That was cut out as well. At this point, Nadeem starts sliding down one of the fire poles, and he gets stuck, basically, because he's in the armor, and he's just scraping slowly down the thing because he's wearing all that armor. And he kind of like toys and jokes with Garraka, which is like, okay, it wasn't too bad. And then he goes to light the lighter, and it's done. It's empty. And Garraka, like, calls it over, like, I don't know, takes it out of his hand and just like makes it like dust, basically. And that is when Garraka starts spitting out all of the ice and stuff, and all the spikes start coming up, and the containment unit starts cracking and everything. And so the newer Ghostbusters are on this side, the OGs are on that side, and the spikes are coming up to them, and they start freezing. They literally start freezing, just like the other characters. I was not expecting that at all. They literally start to be frozen. So the containment unit breaks open, the ghosts are spilling out all over the place. Phoebe goes upstairs with the new pack and starts to fight Garraka, and it is working, but Garaka's very strong. And he does start, I think, overpowering her, and the pack starts freezing, and then she's freezing. She starts freezing as well. So then everybody's frozen. It's like quiet, like you just don't see anything, except everybody's like now frozen. And so Melody then appears, and she's got the one match left. Very much reminded me of Fifth Element. And she strikes the match, and then you see it just stretch over to where Nadeem is, but you didn't see him frozen. You don't know if he's frozen. You don't know what the deal was, because they didn't show him at all. And I found that weird. Like, why would they not have shown him or what he was doing? Because if he wasn't frozen, I mean, he's still a threat. So I don't know. He almost seemed stuck in position, but he gets the fire over. It's in his hands, basically, and it becomes like a great big, fireball. And so he starts to control it, and everybody starts, because the fireball's getting bigger and bigger, everybody starts melting. All the ice starts melting and stuff like that. And then he just like shoots this fire from his hand to Garraka. And then, since everything's melting, Phoebe's pack is working again. She's firing upon Garraka, and it's Trevor, Callie, and Gary are basically like holding her up, because Garraka's like flailing about all over the place. Somehow Podcast made it into the Ecto-1 that was in the back, crashed, and he opens the drone trap. But Garraka ends up hitting it, and it ends up breaking. Now that's when we get the line, "We're going to need a bigger trap." But it was a different angle. It was literally just Bill Murray's face. I mean, I liked the one in the trailer much better, where it was all four of them on the one side, but instead it was all close up on Bill Murray. So Ray theorizes that because all of the ghosts have now come out of the containment unit, they can somehow change the containment unit to become a giant trap, basically. And so they go downstairs, and Ray does whatever he does to make it work, and they're trying to pull the lever down, and it's frozen, and it won't work, and it was already like broken before, and so all four of them have to like pull it all down, and it works, and it ends up trapping Garraka in there. And there was also another scene, again, that was like a reverse shot. In the trailer, the light was green and it was going to red, making it look like something dangerous had happened, but that shot was reversed. In the movie, it was red, and then it turns to green. That's the shot that they used. They just reversed it in the trailer for whatever reason, because we don't see that. It doesn't happen. And Janine says something like, "Oh, the light is green," or whatever like that. After that, Phoebe's talking to Melody, and Melody starts like disappearing, just like Egon did, because she's redeemed herself, and so she like dissipates away, and all of the ice all around New York City is melting, which people stayed there. They showed shots of people in New York. There was one shot of a woman with like a Starbucks cup, but like a tank top, and she's like this, and like but everything else is frozen. So why are they not frozen? I couldn't understand. Like, there were the spikes everywhere. So why were they not frozen? There were these people just walking around. Shouldn't they have been frozen? And it added so many questions. What I thought, I'm like, was everybody in the city frozen? Like, are they all in danger? Like, how long have they been frozen? What's the timetable here? So it just was not clear on that. So the team goes outside, and people are all out there cheering for them. And all of a sudden, Lars appears out of nowhere, and he's like, "So what happened?" Like, he came out of nowhere. Now, I knew from the trailer that he was stuck in the slime or stuck to the floor, but like in the movie, you have no idea what happened to him. It's just missing. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't reference that he got slimed. It just doesn't say anything. He comes out of nowhere. Not developed enough, like just really not a developed character. Neither was Lucky. Like characters came in and disappeared. Like that's how I'm certain there's a lot more that's deleted. Peck shows up. He starts, yelling at them and saying he's going to arrest them. But then news reporters are like, "Aren't you so proud of them? They've saved the city." And I'm sure you had something to do with this, right? You're the mayor. And he's all like, "Oh, I don't know." And Venkman starts a little bit. I was hoping Venkman would go in on him a little bit more. But he jokes around. He said some stuff like, "Oh yeah, this is the reason he loves us," or that kind of thing. Like it was some jokes kind of like that. But you heard someone in the back in the crowd, someone yelled, "Yeah, dickless," or something like that. And it just seems like they're trying to coerce, the mayor into it. And he kind of like reluctantly, he's like, "Well, maybe," and they just all start cheering for them. And we pretty much see that scene, but again, it's a different angle. Winston is talking to the news reporter. We see it from a different angle in the movie. It's more seeing Winston's face and not the side that we see in the trailers. They're interviewing Janine out there. Janine says something like, "This is the first time we had to deal with some kind of god," or something like that. And then Callie and Trevor and Gary and Phoebe are all talking, and that's when we see Slimer flying out of the house, and he's being chased by the sewer dragon. And Trevor wants to drive the car, and Callie says, "All right, you can do that." And then I don't know. Phoebe says either, I want to go or whatever. I guess Gary agrees, or they both agree, and she calls him Dad, which to me just didn't. You know what I mean? Like, it was just weird, and it like I said, were the two of them even together? Callie, like, they just didn't. There was no chemistry there. There was no there was nothing. Not a scene of them holding hands. Not a scene of them sitting. Well, there was one scene of them together, like a little closer together. But that was in the kitchen scene. That was deleted, so that wasn't in there. And even when they're talking about fighting for the Firehouse, and Gary's trying to convince her, there's not even a hug. There's nothing. There's not a hug. There's not a handhold. There's not a, I appreciate you. Like, there's nothing to imply this. So when she calls him Dad, I'm like, it just didn't work. So they get in the Ecto one, and that's the scene I thought was way at the beginning. And Callie's like, "Drive slow. There's people everywhere. You run over them." And so they take off down the street, and we see Slimer, and then we see the subway monster, and then we see all the other spirits that have escaped. So they are all out. It's not like they all got sucked back in. They are floating around out there, so they have to trap them basically once again. So, and then as that's happening, the Ghostbusters theme music starts playing. So there's only one after credit scene. I was kind of disappointed. There was nothing like last time to suggest more, but I guess the ending scene does suggest more. And it was the mini puffs. They had actually gotten into some guy's truck and took it over, and it was actually a Stay Puft Marshmallow truck, and they just took off with it and go down the road with it while the trucker's like running after them screaming. And so that was it. That was the only end credit scene that was there. So here's a quick rundown of the scenes that were deleted or not included in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire theatrical release, but were in the trailers and TV spots. So Janine answering the phone saying, "Ghostbusters, what do you want?" That was not in there. There's also a shot of the phone just sitting on the desk. That did not appear to be in there. There's that woman who's walking with the haunted doll over her shoulder. We see the outside of Ray's Occult, and she's walking in. That shot was not in there. Lucky yelling, "Get away from her," when they're in the lab, yelling that to Garraka. That was not in there. Lucky's eyes getting frozen over. That was not in there. The rooftop scene with Callie, Gary, Phoebe, and Trevor, where they're in the red parkas. That's not in there. That was like one of the best scenes, it seemed like, and it was cut out. The ghost chopper line and the whole conversation that Ray is having with them in the kitchen, that's not in there. There's a whole scene with Bill Murray that was cut out. At some point in the movie, Bill Murray goes to look at the containment unit that is like crumbling and having trouble with Callie and Gruberson there. And it was in one of the trailers where Gary's like, "So what would you have done back in the day?" And Venkman's like, "Oh, I would have shaved and showered and hit the clubs." That's not in there. So they got Bill Murray back and they deleted a scene with Bill Murray. It was not in there. There was a lot of those New York heat wave shots that weren't in there, like the water fire hydrant spraying and the shoes hanging. A lot of that stuff I did not see in there. A big scene that wasn't in there, well, it wasn't a big scene, but I feel like this scene was kind of significant to not be in there, which is Trevor looking at Egon's photo in the attic. That wasn't in there. There was also like a little line that Trevor had, something like he joked about, "Oh, I had my reservations about moving to New York, garbage ghosts, garbage ghosts." That wasn't in there. There was a scene with Callie busting ghosts outside of one of the Firehouse windows with Gruberson and Phoebe there. And that wasn't in there. And Gruberson looking out the window, that I guess was busted out. That wasn't there. Pinfield, after he got slimed by Pukey, gets stuck to the floor and is laying there. That scene itself was not there. Pukey puking was there, but it cut there. We don't see Pinfield laying stuck on the floor. Winston handing Ray the proton pack back to him. If there was any type of apology scene or discussion or talk between the two of them, that wasn't in there, but we do see it in the trailer that scene should have been a little bit longer with Winston handing back the proton pack to Ray. Gary saying "damn," like he looked very upset. That wasn't in there. There was a shot of Janine, Ray, and Lucky. Like that wasn't in there. There was a lot of just like little shots too, like that kind of thing that just weren't in there at all. I don't know. That's a lot. That's a lot to have been cut out, but to have been included in the trailers. And there may be more, because I stopped looking at stuff, like a week or two before, because there was just so much footage being released. And so I didn't want to see too much more. So there may have been more in the trailers that I don't know, it wasn't included in the movie. But it's just weird that they cut all these things out, but yet they were in the trailer. Again, my only thought is that the movie was running too long. The studio wanted it to be a certain length, under 2 hours, and they had to do their best to cut every little thing here and there that they could. I don't know that this would have been the director doing it. There's just too much attention to detail, and those things being cut just didn't make sense. And it does jumble up the movie a little bit, and it loses a little bit of, I think, a good flow. Since those things are out there, it's not bad. It is fun, but it is very fast. And because I know those things were missing, it's hard for me to now gauge what I would have felt if I hadn't seen those things, because I'm waiting for these scenes and they weren't in it. So I don't know. I feel like maybe the company made the director trim this down quite a bit, and there's probably like an extra 10 minutes or so that should have been in there that isn't. So I mean, in all, I did enjoy it. I was talking to my friend about it. He was like, it was not a bomb of a movie, and it's not. It's not a total bomb of a movie. It really, really isn't. It's just, I would really love to see a director's cut, all those scenes put back in, an extended cut, something like that, because I do think they add something. I really think there are things missing, and who knows what else might be deleted altogether. I could see a lot of detail and a lot of specifics went into this, so it's not a bad movie. So it is something worth checking out, honestly, and I really hope on the DVD or something, hopefully people catch on to this if they're reviewing it. If they're a real fan, have like seen all these things and go, wait a minute, these scenes weren't in there. You know, really advocate for getting a director's cut or an extended edition cut, because there was just way too much that was cut out, that was shown to the public, and really should be put back in there to get, I think, a more cohesive story. So, but it was fun. You know, I did enjoy it. I just knew that there were things missing. So hopefully that will change. Hopefully we'll get to see that one day. But anyway, if you stuck around for this whole thing, thank you very much, and I will see you again.